The rain had begun to fall softly, each drop tapping a delicate rhythm on the glass windows, as if the sky itself mourned the spectacle unfolding beneath it. Inside the grand hall, laughter echoed like thunder, but beneath that cacophony, a fragile silence hung in the air, sharp, tense, and heavy with unspoken judgments. A young woman, draped in a simple dress that bore the marks of modesty rather than wealth, stood quietly at the edge of the room. Her hands trembled slightly, her heart pounding against her ribs like a drumbeat of vulnerability. Her eyes darted nervously, catching glimpses of polished shoes and glittering jewels that seemed to mock her presence, her humble beginnings laid bare beneath their sparkling veneer. The scent of expensive perfume and polished wood filled the air, yet all she could feel was the cold weight of their laughter, like icy shards piercing her skin. Her cheeks flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and silent defiance, tears threatening to spill, but she held them back, clinging to the hope that dignity could still survive amid the sneers. Her breath hitched as a voice, sharp and dismissive, sliced through the murmur of the crowd, ridiculing her, casting her as an outsider in this world of wealth and privilege. And then, amid the swirling pride and condescension, a voice rose, steady, calm, unwavering, like a beacon piercing through a storm. The room seemed to hush as the neighbor, a man whose presence had always been quiet but steady, stepped forward. His eyes, warm yet firm, locked onto hers, and in that moment, the rain outside seemed to pause, holding its breath with the world. No grand gestures, no dramatic declarations, just a simple, sincere act of standing beside her, a silent reassurance that echoed louder than words. The tension shifted, the air thick with anticipation and surprise. This was not a hero's cry for justice, nor a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet assertion, an unspoken vow that kindness could still bloom in the shadows of cruelty. The rain continued to fall softly, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest storms, there are moments when compassion quietly, profoundly, changes everything. And in that silent space, the young woman's trembling hands found a moment of calm, her heartbeat slowing, her tears shimmering like tiny stars ready to fall, but held back by a newfound strength. Because sometimes, it's not the loudest voice that changes the world, but the quiet, unwavering act of standing up when it matters most. And as the rain molds the world anew, so too does hope shape the future, one gentle act at a time. She stood there, trembling, her hands clutching the fabric of her simple dress as if it were a shield against the storm of whispers and laughter around her. The room's opulence felt like a distant echo, a world she had only glimpsed in fleeting dreams, yet tonight, she was painfully reminded of how far she was from it. Her eyes, usually bright with hope, now shimmered with the weight of unspoken grief, a quiet ache that lingered deep within her chest, like a wound that refused to heal. For years she had carried the loneliness of loving from afar, of holding on to a fragile hope that someday, somehow, she would be enough. But life had a cruel way of reminding her that her place was on the margins, an outsider in the world of shimmering gowns and polished shoes, her humble beginnings a glaring scar in a sea of wealth. Her heart felt heavy with the burden of rejection, a silent ache born from years of feeling unseen, of being dismissed before she could even speak. The ache of loss clung to her, loss of innocence, trust, and the simple belief that kindness could come from unexpected places. Her eyes traced the cracks in the marble floor, each step echoing her quiet despair. She wondered if she would ever be truly embraced, or if her worth would forever be measured by what she lacked: wealth, status, glamour. Tears threatened to spill, but she swallowed them back, trying to hold on to the fragile veneer of composure. The world around her seemed to blur, a haze of cold judgment and silence that pressed heavily on her soul. She longed for warmth, for acceptance, for something more than the relentless echo of her own silent suffering. Her shoulders slumped under the weight of her emotions, and for a moment she allowed herself to feel the full depth of her vulnerability, raw and unguarded. In that quiet darkness within, she was painfully aware of her scars, those invisible wounds of rejection and loneliness that no amount of modesty could hide. She felt as if she were standing on the edge of a vast emptiness, a chasm of pain that threatened to swallow her whole. Yet, amidst the ache, there was a flicker of something else, an almost imperceptible spark of resilience, A whisper of hope that maybe, just maybe, her presence mattered beyond the judgments cast upon her. As she looked down at her trembling hands, she wondered if anyone saw her true pain beneath the surface. And then, as if summoned by the silent prayers she dared not voice, a new voice broke through the silence, gentle, steady, and unexpectedly kind. It was a quiet reminder that even in the depths of despair, there is a fragile beauty in vulnerability, a reminder that sometimes, the greatest strength is simply to be seen in one's rawest moments, to be loved not despite the scars but because of them. The rain outside continued to fall softly, washing over everything, as if to cleanse away the pain and whisper that healing begins when we allow ourselves to be truly, painfully human. The room's breathless silence was momentarily broken by a quiet, measured voice that seemed to drift through the air like a gentle breeze. It was not loud or commanding, but it carried a quiet authority that demanded attention without effort. She looked up, eyes wide with surprise, as a man stepped forward, his presence unassuming, yet impossible to ignore. He was not tall or broad-shouldered, nor did he possess the kind of polished charm that drew crowds. Instead, he was simply a man, slightly hunched, with tired eyes that had seen too much and a smile that seemed to carry the weight of unspoken regrets. His clothes were worn, a little wrinkled, and he had the faint scent of rain and earth clinging to him, as if he had just come from working outdoors. His hands bore the marks of labor, rough, calloused, and scarred, and his face carried lines of hardship that no amount of money could erase. He hesitated briefly at the edge of the crowd, as if unsure if he belonged there, before slowly approaching her. His gaze was steady, not full of pity or condescension, but something softer, like a gentle acknowledgement of her pain. Without a word, he simply offered her a small, tentative smile, one born of quiet empathy rather than heroism. The kind of smile that doesn't ask for gratitude or recognition but simply says, "I see you." His eyes flicked to the women mocking her, then back to her, as if weighing whether to speak or stay silent. He chose the latter, leaning slightly to the side, seeming more like an observer than a participant. But that was enough. Just his presence, the unpretentious, imperfect human standing beside her, felt like a gentle reminder that kindness didn't have to be loud or flashy to be genuine. It was in the subtle shift of a posture, in the quiet acknowledgement of another's suffering. He looked at her with a quiet understanding, as if he knew the ache lurking behind her eyes, the fragile hope she desperately tried to hold on to. His gaze lingered not in pity, but in a way that subtly said, "You are seen and you matter." Then, with a slow nod, he turned his attention back to the room, not seeking applause or recognition, simply returning to the shadows where he belonged. She watched him go, feeling the faintest flicker of something unfamiliar, perhaps a small spark of hope or permission to breathe a little easier. There was no grand speech, no sweeping gestures, only the quiet strength of someone who simply chose to be kind in the smallest moments. His act was like a soft stone tossed into still waters, sending ripples outward, subtle, but capable of awakening something in her she thought had long been lost. Outside, the rain continued its gentle song, washing over everything with a quiet persistence. In that moment, as she looked at the imperfect man who had entered her world, she felt the faintest threads of possibility weaving through her pain, reminding her that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness come from the most unassuming people, and that even in the shadows, there's a quiet beauty in simply being human. The next morning, the sky was still heavy with clouds, a soft gray blanket stretching endlessly. She sat on her modest porch, her fingers tracing the edge of a chipped ceramic cup, the warmth of the tea inside offering a rare comfort. It was a quiet moment, the kind that often escaped her in the rush of days filled with silent struggles. But today, something felt different, an unspoken promise lingering in the air, fragile yet undeniable. She hadn't expected anyone to notice her, let alone extend a hand in such gentle ways. From across the yard she saw him, her quiet neighbor, approaching with a slow, deliberate gait. In his hands he carried a small loaf of bread, its crust golden and inviting. Without asking, he placed it on her porch table, a simple gesture that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. She looked up, caught off guard, her heart tightening with a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. Her voice was hesitant as she murmured a thank you, but he only nodded, a small smile softening his weathered face. It was a gesture that needed no elaboration, an act of sharing, of offering warmth without expectation. Days slipped into weeks, and their interactions became a quiet rhythm, small acts that felt like delicate stitches repairing her isolation. Sometimes he would walk by her house and, noticing her struggling with a heavy bag, would pause to help, his rough hands gently lifting the burden. No words, just a shared glance that conveyed understanding. Other times he'd arrive at her doorstep with a bundle of wildflowers gathered from the fields, flowers that he'd picked simply because they caught his eye, their colors muted but their scent sweet. She would accept them with a shy smile, her fingers brushing his as she took the fragile stems. Each gesture, though small, seemed to gently peel away the layers of loneliness that had built up around her. One rainy afternoon, she found herself caught in a sudden downpour while returning from a nearby market. Her umbrella was no match for the relentless rain, and her dress clung uncomfortably to her skin. As she hurried back, soaked and shivering, she saw him approaching with an old, battered umbrella. Without a word, he held it out to her, his eyes soft with a quiet kindness. She hesitated for a moment, then stepped beneath the worn canopy, feeling the shelter not just from the rain but from the cold distance she had carried within her for so long. The rain continued to fall, a gentle percussion on the umbrella's fabric, as they walked together, side by side, through the muddy path leading home. For a moment, the storm around her seemed to fade, replaced by the steady beat of her own heartbeat, less lonely now, a little more human. Sometimes he would stop by her humble home and simply sit with her in silence, sharing a cup of tea or a loaf of bread, the quiet companionship speaking volumes. There was no grand proclamation, no sweeping gestures, only the subtle, persistent act of showing up, of being present in her small world. Each day, these gestures chipped away at her sense of isolation, gently reminding her that kindness didn't have to be loud to be powerful. It was in the understated moments, an offered hand, a shared meal, a shelter from the rain, that she found fragments of hope. Yet, even as her world softened, external conflicts lurked on the horizon, rumors spreading, shadows lengthening, the fragile peace she was beginning to build threatened by forces beyond her control. The small, meaningful gestures had begun to create a fragile bridge, but the winds of external turmoil would test its strength. Still, as she looked at him, her humble neighbor, she knew that sometimes, the smallest acts of kindness could be the quietest anchors in a storm. And maybe, just maybe, they were enough to hold on to when the world around them threatened to unravel. The morning sun cast long shadows across the village, but beneath that gentle light, a storm was quietly brewing. Whispers had begun to ripple through the tight-knit community, small, insidious ripples that grew into waves of gossip and judgment. It started subtly, a neighbor's glance, a hushed conversation, a twinge of suspicion that seemed to cling to the air like the scent of rain before a thunderstorm. Rumors spread about her humble origins, her simple dress, her silence that many interpreted as shame or concealment. The whispers wound their way into every corner of the village, whispering that a bride from nothing could never truly belong among the privileged, that her presence was an anomaly, a stain on the otherwise pristine fabric of their society. The weight of these rumors fell heavily on her shoulders, pressing down like the oppressive heat of an approaching storm. She could feel the eyes, those judging, critical eyes, following her footsteps everywhere she went. The community's gaze was no longer silent, it was loud and relentless, and each look felt like a stone thrown in her direction. The gossip grew louder, more pointed, especially when she dared to step outside her door, her simple dress now a symbol of her supposed inadequacy in a world that valued wealth and status above all else. Her heart clenched with every sneer, every whispered remark that painted her as an outsider, unworthy of even the smallest happiness or acceptance. And then came the worst blow, her family's rejection. The news traveled fast that her loved ones, pressured by the community's scorn, had disapproved of her union with the neighbor, the man who had quietly, steadily, refused to succumb to the gossip. Her family, once her sanctuary, now seemed distant and cold. They called her foolish, naive, a girl who had brought shame upon their name. Her mother's voice, once gentle and caring, had hardened into a tone of disappointment. Her father, who once stood by her side, now looked away in silence, unable or unwilling to defend her. The pain of that rejection cut deeper than any words. It felt like the ground beneath her had crumbled, leaving her suspended in a void where love and belonging seemed impossibly out of reach. She wandered through her days like a ghost, shadows of doubt whispering in her mind. The fragile bond she had built with the neighbor, the small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of shared understanding, began to feel like fragile glass, ready to shatter under the weight of external hostility. Every glance from the community, every snide remark, made her question whether her quiet hope was a foolish dream. Could love survive such a storm? Or was she doomed to be forever cast aside, her humble heart too insignificant to withstand the torrent of judgment? That evening she stood by her window, staring out at the horizon where dark clouds gathered, mirroring her inner turmoil. The wind whispered through the trees, a mournful sound that echoed her fears. Her mind was a tumult of doubt. Was her choice to love him foolish? Would they be able to withstand the relentless waves crashing against them? The external world was closing in, threatening to drown her fragile hope in a sea of cynicism and rejection. Yet, amid the storm of rumors and rejection, somewhere deep inside, she felt the steady pulse of her heart, weak but persistent, reminding her of the small acts of kindness he'd shown her, the quiet support that had kept her afloat. She clung to those moments like a fragile boat in stormy waters, knowing that the true test of their bond was yet to come. The wind howled louder, but she drew a breath, feeling the faintest spark of resilience flicker within her. Whatever lay ahead, she knew she wouldn't face it alone, for love, though battered, was still alive in her heart, waiting for the storm to pass. As the shadows lengthened into the quiet hours of the evening, he remained there, just outside the doorway, steadfast and unyielding. His presence was unassuming, yet in that stillness, there was an undeniable strength. He hadn't spoken much after the harsh words and the whispers, no grand speeches or promises, just his quiet stance, a silent testament to loyalty. His eyes, gentle but unwavering, watched her from a distance, offering her a sense of grounding that words could never fully express. She was seated on the porch step, her shoulders hunched, clutching her hands in her lap, the weight of the day pressing heavily on her. She looked away, trying to hide the trembling in her voice, the ache that threatened to spill over. But he stayed, not rushing to her side, not demanding her to speak. Instead, he simply positioned himself nearby, a silent guardian amid the storm of her doubts. When she looked at him, she saw the quiet resolve in his gaze, an affirmation that he was not going anywhere, that he would stand with her, even when the world tried to tear her down. Sometimes he took a slow step closer, enough to be near but not intrusive, offering the kind of support that was rooted in genuine understanding. He listened to her fears, her silent tears, her unspoken hopes, without judgment, without trying to fix what felt unfixable. The night air carried the faint scent of rain, and he let it settle around them, a gentle reminder that even storms could pass. His presence was human, a steady, humble support born from a genuine care, not from a desire to rescue but from a desire to be present. When she finally looked up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, she saw him watching her, not with pity, but with quiet compassion. She had expected him to speak, to say something that might fix everything, but he simply reached out, placing a hand softly on her shoulder. The touch was grounding, a simple act that conveyed more than words ever could. It's okay to feel fragile, it seemed to say. It's okay to be unsure. In that moment, his steadfastness became a mirror for her own inner strength, an unspoken promise that she was not alone, that even amidst the chaos of gossip and rejection, there was still a quiet, enduring anchor holding her steady. She realized that his loyalty wasn't about grand gestures or heroic deeds, but about the small, consistent choices to stay, to listen, to be present. It was in the way he lingered nearby even when others turned away, in the way he met her gaze with unwavering kindness, in the simple act of standing beside her in silent solidarity. She felt a warmth rise within her, a slow, steady awakening that her worth wasn't defined by the judgments cast upon her, but by the quiet resilience that grew with each passing moment. As the sky darkened and the first hints of dawn tinged the clouds with pale light, she knew her journey was far from over. But now, she carried within her a small ember of hope, fueled by his genuine support, that even the deepest storms could be weathered, that her dignity was not lost but quietly reaffirmed by the steadfast presence of someone who believed in her when the world had turned its back. And so, standing there in the dawn's soft glow, she took a slow, deliberate breath, feeling the gentle strength of that support settle into her bones, whispering that she was stronger than she thought, not because she was fearless, but because she was not alone. In the quiet days that followed, a subtle change blossomed within her, like the first gentle rays of dawn breaking through a long, shadowed night. The weight of gossip and rejection still lingered, but it no longer held her captive. Instead, she found herself waking with a new sense of purpose, a quiet resolve that had begun to take root deep inside her soul. The mocking voices, once sharp and relentless, seemed distant now, muffled by a growing awareness that her worth was not determined by others' opinions but by the quiet strength she carried within. She began to notice the small things, the way the sunlight danced on the leaves, the rhythm of her breath, the gentle hum of life around her. With each passing day, she allowed herself to smile more often, a soft, genuine smile that was no longer guarded but open and free. She rediscovered her passions, those simple pleasures that had once been buried beneath doubt and shame. Perhaps she started to craft small gifts, sewn with her own hands, or tended to the garden with a renewed sense of patience and care. Each act became a quiet affirmation that her worth was rooted in her own kindness, her own resilience. She realized that she didn't need to be rescued or validated by others. Her value was intrinsic, a spark that no gossip or judgment could extinguish. She began to dream again, about a future where her voice mattered, where her efforts could inspire others facing their own storms. She might have once believed her place was simply to endure, but now she saw that she could shape her own story, step by step, moment by moment. In small gatherings, she started to share her stories, her lessons learned from pain and perseverance. Her words, humble but honest, began to resonate with others who had felt invisible or cast aside. She wasn't trying to impress or to prove anything, she simply offered her truth with gentle humility. And in doing so, she slowly became a beacon of quiet strength for those around her, showing that even among whispers of judgment, genuine kindness and authenticity could flourish. Her journey wasn't about dramatic change overnight, but about the slow, steady awakening of her inner light. She learned that her worth wasn't measured by wealth or status but by her capacity to love, to create, and to inspire. Each small act of courage, smiling through tears, sharing her story, tending her garden, became a testament to her resilience. Her heart, once fragile and uncertain, grew steadier with each passing day, like the steady beat of a drum that keeps time even in chaos. She envisioned herself as a quiet force, a ripple spreading outward, showing others that their voices mattered, that their stories could be a source of hope. Her internal transformation was subtle but profound, a shift from seeking approval to embracing her own dignity, from fear to hope. She understood that her true strength came from within, an unbreakable core that no external storm could shake. As she looked toward the horizon, where the sky met the earth in a promise of new beginnings, she felt a gentle whisper of purpose stirring within her. She was no longer merely the girl who had been mocked at a party. She was becoming the woman who, through her own quiet resilience, could inspire others to find their own light in the darkness. Her journey was ongoing, but now she moved forward with a steady heart, knowing that her worth was rooted in her spirit, an eternal flame that no one could ever extinguish. And in that truth, she found her peace, her strength, and her hope for all the days to come. The day had arrived, an occasion that shimmered with the promise of change, yet also carried the weight of vulnerability. The village square, once echoing with whispers and judgment, now buzzed softly with anticipation. A modest stage had been set, draped in simple fabrics, yet beneath the humble surroundings, something extraordinary was unfolding. She stood at the center, her hands trembling slightly, not from fear but from the quiet strength that had been slowly growing within her. The community gathered around, some familiar faces, others distant or watchful, all witnessing a moment carved from her own courage. Her gaze swept across the crowd, settling on her family, the neighbors, and even the women who had once mocked her at the party. Their eyes flickered with surprise, curiosity, and perhaps a flicker of acknowledgement, an unspoken recognition of the journey she had undertaken. She took a breath, steadying herself against the storm of doubt that still lingered in her mind. The words she had practiced in quiet moments rose to her lips, clear and honest. "I stand here today not to seek approval," she began, voice trembling just enough to reveal her humanity, "but to share my truth. I am no longer afraid of what others think, because I have learned that my worth does not depend on their acceptance." Her voice grew steadier, carrying across the assembled crowd like a gentle but firm wave. Each of us has a story, one that's often shaped by others' judgments, but also by the quiet strength we carry inside. I have learned to listen to that strength, to nurture it, and to allow it to grow. Today, I want to show that no matter where we come from, we all have the right to be seen, to be heard, and to be loved for who we truly are. The crowd was silent now, the air thick with emotion. Some faces softened, others looked away, but many watched with a new understanding. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage, her heart pounding but her spirit soaring. She reached into her pocket and gently pulled out a small, handmade cloth, a simple gift she had crafted herself, imbued with her hopes and dreams. With a steady hand, she lifted it high, offering it to the community. "This is a symbol," she said softly, "of my journey, of humility, resilience, and the courage to stand here today. I hope it reminds us all that the greatest strength lies within, waiting to be uncovered by those willing to face their fears." Her words, genuine and unadorned, rippled outward, touching those who had once dismissed her. The audience began to shift, faces once lined with skepticism softened into smiles, and the whispers of gossip dissolved into applause. Some clapped hesitantly at first, then with increasing warmth, acknowledging her courage. Her family, once distant and disapproving, looked on with tentative pride, their eyes shining with a newfound respect. The woman who had been mocked at the party was no longer invisible, she was visible, celebrated not for her humble origins, but for her unwavering authenticity. The community was witnessing a quiet revolution, an acceptance born from her own bravery and the collective awakening of their hearts. As she stepped down from the stage, her knees wobbled, but her spirit was unbreakable. She felt the gentle embrace of the sunlight filtering through the clouds, bathing her in golden light. The sky above, once stormy, now stretched clear and vast, promising new beginnings. The words she had spoken echoed in her mind, reminding her that true acceptance begins within, and that often, the greatest acts of courage are those that open the door for others to follow. Her journey was far from over, but today, she had taken the first step into her own light, inspiring others to find their voice amid the shadows. And as the community celebrated that moment of shared vulnerability and hope, she knew that her story was now woven into the fabric of their collective heart, an enduring testament to the power of authenticity, resilience, and love. The air in the humble home was thick with silence, yet beneath that quietness, something was shifting, an unspoken acknowledgement of change that had quietly begun to bloom. She sat at the small wooden table, her hands trembling slightly, but her gaze was steady, filled with a quiet hope. Her mother stood nearby, eyes glistening, her face a mixture of pride and regret. For so long, her words had been sharp, disapproving, dismissive, and yet now, as she looked at her daughter's face, the years of misunderstanding seemed to weigh heavily, pressing against her chest. She took a hesitant step forward, her voice trembling as she finally broke the silence. "I was wrong," she whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "I thought I knew what was best for you, but I see now I only saw what I wanted to see. I judged you by appearances and words that didn't matter. I was blind to the strength you carry inside." Her daughter's eyes widened, a single tear slipping down her cheek as she listened. Her mother's words were slow, deliberate, each syllable a balm to her wounded heart. "You are brave," her mother continued, voice thick with emotion. And I am sorry for the pain I've caused. I see now that love isn't about wealth or status. It's about understanding, acceptance, and believing in someone even when it's hard. I was wrong to reject your happiness, and I want to make amends. Her mother reached out, her hand trembling, and gently took her daughter's in her own. In that quiet moment, the years of resentment and misunderstanding dissolved into tears, tears of regret, forgiveness, and hope. Her daughter's sobs were soft but genuine as she leaned into her mother's embrace, feeling the warmth of an apology long overdue. Outside, the sun cast golden rays through the window, illuminating the room with a gentle glow, like a promise that new beginnings could still be born from the ashes of past mistakes. The mother held her daughter close, whispering words of love and repentance, each word a thread weaving their hearts back together, stronger and more resilient than before. Slowly, her father entered the room, his eyes clouded with a mixture of remorse and relief. He had been silent for so long, caught in his own fears and prejudices. But now he stepped forward, his voice low and sincere. I was blind, he admitted, voice steady but heavy with emotion. I let my pride and my worries blind me to what truly matters. I saw only what was convenient to see, blind to your happiness, blind to your strength. I ask for your forgiveness, and I promise to do better, for all of us. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at his daughter, the woman he had once dismissed, now standing resilient and radiant in her truth. The family gathered there, each heart heavy with regret but also filled with a newfound understanding. They had each carried their own burdens of judgment, but today, they chose to lay them down. They chose to see her, not as the humble bride they once dismissed, but as a woman of integrity and courage. The room filled with a gentle, healing energy, an unspoken promise that love, when rooted in honesty and forgiveness, can mend even the deepest wounds. As they embraced, the sky outside shifted, a soft dawn breaking through the clouds, casting a gentle light over the home. It was a reminder that redemption is a slow, patient process, one that requires humility, tears, and the courage to admit when we were wrong. And in that moment, surrounded by her family's tears and acceptance, she found herself finally free from the shadows of judgment, embraced by the warmth of understanding. The path ahead was still uncertain, but with every step, her heart was lighter, knowing that love and forgiveness could transform even the deepest wounds into a new beginning, like a dawn that rises slowly, patiently, to paint the sky with hope. And so, she stood there, in the embrace of her family, ready to walk into that luminous horizon, carrying the promise that every mistake can be redeemed, every heart healed, and every love restored. As the evening settled, the world around her seemed to hold its breath, waiting in quiet anticipation. The stars had begun to pierce through the darkening sky, tiny lanterns of light that shimmered softly, like whispers of hope stretching across the vast night. She stood beneath that canopy of shimmering constellations, a gentle breeze brushing her cheek, carrying the scent of blooming flowers and distant promises. In that stillness, she felt the weight of her journey, every moment of doubt, every act of courage, all woven together into a tapestry of resilience and love. The sky, vast and infinite, reminded her that no matter how small or humble her beginnings, she was part of something greater, an endless universe where every soul is connected by threads of compassion and understanding. The dawn was not far away, she knew that. A new day was quietly unfolding behind the horizon, painted with strokes of pink and gold, heralding renewal and hope. The darkness that once seemed overwhelming now felt like the night's gentle lullaby, a prelude to the light that would come with patience and faith. As the first rays of sun peeked over the hills, they spilled across the land like a promise, soft, warm, and full of potential. Her heart swelled with a quiet knowing that love, true and unwavering, was not some distant miracle but a living proof that no one truly had to walk alone in this world. We all carry scars, doubts, and fears, but when we choose to stand in our truth and accept others with kindness, we illuminate the path for those still searching in the shadows. In that moment of dawn's gentle awakening, she saw not just the rising sun, but the dawn within herself, a light born from courage, forgiveness, and hope. The stars, still faintly twinkling above, seemed to wink in silent encouragement, reminding her that even in the darkest nights, beauty persists. Love isn't about magic or salvation, it's about the quiet, persistent act of showing up each day, of offering kindness when it's most needed, of holding space for others' journeys just as they are. It's in the small acts, like a gentle smile, a listening ear, or a moment of vulnerability, that the universe reveals its greatest truths. So let us remember that each of us is part of this endless sky, illuminating the world with our unique light. Even when shadows loom or judgments threaten to dim our spirits, the dawn reminds us that hope is always just beyond the horizon. When we choose love, steadfast, patient, and genuine, we become beacons for others, guiding them through their own nights of doubt. And in this collective glow, we discover that no one is truly alone. We are all bound by the silent, eternal song of compassion. If this story has touched your heart, consider sharing it, because every act of kindness and understanding can ripple outward, transforming the world, one star at a time. Like the night giving way to dawn, let's shine together, illuminating the path for those still searching for their own light. Subscribe to carry this message forward, and like and share to remind others that love's greatest power lies in our willingness to see and accept each other, just as we are. Remember, the universe is vast, but within it, our smallest acts can create the most magnificent dawns. So, let's walk forward with open hearts, trusting that love is the greatest journey of all, one that unites us in the silent, everlasting beauty of the night sky, forever shining, forever alive.